Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever or whenever you are. Welcome to the MyHeritage webinar series. Today, Catherine Andrew will take us on a deep dive of the U.S. City Directories at MyHeritage. This is one of my personal favorite record collections, so I'm excited to learn more about City Directories with you. Be sure to download her 6-page syllabus, which is available right now on the webinar's registration page, and I'll put that direct link in your chat in just a little bit. Catherine Andrew is a professional genealogist, author, and educator. She holds a BA in Germanic Studies and Political Science and a Master of Library and Information Science. She specializes in German speaking, Midwestern USA, Quaker, women's history, and institutional genealogy. She is the owner of KKA Genealogy LLC, executive director of the Hinsdale Historical Society in Hinsdale, Illinois, and a managing editor of the National Genealogy Society's NGS Monthly. Based in Chicagoland, but at home anywhere, Catherine helps people from all over the world and from all walks of life connect with their heritage. Please put together your virtual hands and let's give Catherine Andrew a nice warm webinar welcome. Catherine, how are you? And welcome to the show.
I am great. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you, and especially good to have this topic, one that is, it's important to all of us. So the screen looks good, Catherine, and just give it another click, and you're okay. It's ready to go. It's all yours.
There we go. All right, great. So good afternoon or evening to those overseas. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine. I am delighted to be speaking to you today. So our topic today is city directories. It is often one that flies sort of under the radar, but is an absolute gold mine for anyone passionate about tracing their ancestry and in understanding the historical context of their family. So not only are they a unique capture of a city or a place during a specific point in time, sort of like taking a photo of an entire town during 1908, but they can also give us very interesting insights into our ancestors' lives and movements. So today we are going to talk about what exactly are city directories, why are they valuable resources, their importance, how they involved, and the wealth of information that they provide about our ancestors' lives and movements. We are also going to go into abbreviations, which are a hidden gem in city directories, and we will discuss how to find them on MyHeritage and also the very unique searching and accessing capabilities of MyHeritage's U.S. City Directory collection. I'll give you a little bit of a case study on one part of my family to show you just how powerful city directories are. And then I'll just go over a few tips for your research. So let's just jump into it. What exactly are city directories? So directories in general started as lists in the late 1700s for businesses. They were originally intended to help clients find businesses and vice versa. So these city directories eventually evolved to include people's personal names as listings, basically essentially becoming sort of like a register of everyone living in a specific city, town, or county. Sometimes we find multiple towns or villages in a single directory. And that's because if the town was smaller, they would include the surrounding towns. Of course, when you get into cities as big as New York, Chicago, LA, usually it's just those specific cities in one directory. So city directories incorporated people's addresses, occupations, and also details about local institutions. However, the city directories didn't just stop evolving there from those simple registers. As technology advanced, The traditional city directory evolved into the telephone directory, and as that suggests, telephone directories also listed telephone numbers. And if you're like me and you are a short person and had to sit up a little higher on your family's dining room table during dinner, you may be well acquainted with yellow books. Those were a different approach. They focused on listing businesses grouped by the kinds of service or product that they offer. And these books became sort of like a go-to source for finding everything from local plumbers to big manufacturing companies. So, of course, each type of these directories have its own unique place and function, but we're going to focus more on city directories today and how they offer a unique window into our family's pasts. So, what exactly can you find in city directories and how can you use them in your genealogy? So one of the most important uses of city directories and genealogy is tracking addresses in our family tree. So city directories came out annually or biannually, so twice a year or once a year. Usually if they were twice a year, you would get one at the beginning of the year and one around July or August. And with these iterations, we can easily trace family members and ancestors' movements over time if they moved houses or into a completely different area. These addresses not only allow us to locate other geographically organized records like court documents or tax records, real estate listings, etc., but they can also prompt us to have further research questions. So, did our ancestor own that house or were they renting it? And did they build that house or did they buy it from a prior resident? What does the house history reveal? That sort of thing. City directories are also pivotal in helping us establish family relationships. So seeing a family's progression from a series of city directories can reveal births, deaths, marriages, and other significant family events. So for example, a married woman living alone, it could indicate widowhood or separation between the husband and wife. Additional surnames at the same address could suggest in-laws or extended family members living with that family. Our ancestors' occupational histories can also be traced through city directories. And so these listings paired with census records and other sources, they can help us understand their work and their economic status, and sometimes even their social standing. So they can do all of those things, but they can also help us look for additional records. So for example, once we have that address listed as a residence in a city directory, we can take that and locate tax records for the property, see if they were renting or owning, go over that house history. We can also look for voting registers. And also, city directories are indispensable for fan research. So if you're not familiar with it, that is called friends, associates, and neighbors fan research. It's a practice where you examine people who lived near your ancestors and relatives, and that can help you discover more about their community and their social interactions and possibly additional family connections. So let's just go over how to look at city directories and what they're composed of. City directories are comprehensive registers of a place during a specific year or 6-month time period. And I break them down into 3 major components. First is residents, second, businesses, and third is institutions. Now, of course, when you actually physically look or electronically look at a city directory, it's not going to likely be in that order. But all of these components sort of together, they outline basically a snapshot, as if you took a photograph of a city or town or county during a specific time. the period that the directory was created, outlining not only who lived there, but what businesses were operating and what institutions shaped the community that our ancestors lived in. So, a really good way to start looking at city directories when you first look at them is to look at the general index or table of contents. This is usually found in the first few pages of the city directory. And so you can see here, this is an example from 1908. It's a Fort Wayne City and Allen County directory. So that is not just Fort Wayne, but included other towns and townships around Fort Wayne in Allen County, Indiana. So this general index provides us with a really great guide as to where to flip to or what image to look for if you're looking online for various aspects of the entire town and county. So you see things like additions and removals, which would be changes made in the directory, the government officials, churches, cemeteries, etc. So it gives you a really great way to navigate it. Okay, so our first little category of what you can find in a city directory will be residents. So the residents section is usually the largest one in a city directory. It's the alphabetical listing by surname of people who live there. Now, it's important to remember that often women were not listed on their own unless they had a significant job in that city or town until about 1950, maybe even a little bit later, depending on the place. So if you were a married woman, you might not be listed at all, or you could be listed next to your husband's name in parentheses. Now, the residence section usually lists, obviously, the surname, given name, address, and possibly their occupation and employer. What is interesting to note, though, is if your ancestor owned their own business or were higher up in a company or even an institution or an organization, like a board member, they may be listed more than once in a city directory. They might be listed in the business section or as an advertiser. So some city directories do include a street-based system. So not only is it alphabetically by surname, but it could be alphabetically by street name. And that, if you are able to find it, gives you a very unique look at who your ancestors' neighbors were, who they were living around and interacting with in their community. So it leads you to fan research. So the second category is businesses. So that also is a completely also offers us a completely other glimpse into the city and town that your ancestors lived in. So it gives us a glimpse at the economic landscape at the time and lists all the businesses operating in the city alongside the names of the owners, often the address of the business, and sometimes details about their products or services. And advertisements, which you'll see quite clearly on the example on this page, they also appear in city directories, not only in the front pages and the back pages, but dispersed among all of the alphabetical surnames and residence pages. So in this example, again, from that 1908 Fort Wayne directory, you can see that not only on both sides of each page is an advertisement for a local business, but also on the top, the middle, and the bottom of each page. So looking at these advertisements can give you much more insight into how your ancestors and relatives actually lived. So what items were in demand, what businesses did they likely frequent, what did goods cost, that sort of thing. And last but not least, the institution section chronicles schools, churches, public buildings, clubs, and other organizations that make up the social fabric of a community. So you can find various homes, hospitals, fraternal organizations, and that kind of grouping. And these are usually found again in the first few pages of the city directory. So by providing these personal, occupational, and community information, city directories give us a very, very detailed look into our ancestors' lives and the places that they lived. So in the next slides, we're going to start to discuss how to leverage this information to the fullest in your genealogy research. But first, we're going to go into something like a little gold mine, in my opinion, hidden gems in city directories, which are these abbreviations. So for most city directories, there are a lot of abbreviations. However, there is a key to abbreviations listed again in the first few pages. Few could be anywhere between 1 and 6, or it can be up to 30 if it's a large city directory and had a lot of institutions in it. But it will be at the front part of the city directory. And so these differ among every city directory and every place that made one, but some of the common ones are on your screen. So H for house or home. It could also mean someone who owns a house. So H and then address means they own the house at this address. And then B, BD, BDS, boards. So they were a boarder or lodger at the address, and so on and so forth. So another example, from 1908, you can see just how many abbreviations were included in the city directory. And if you take a closer look at this list, you can see that not only were street directions, so like northeast corner, NECOR, meant northeast corner, but you can also see that different occupations were abbreviated. So AGT meant agent, cash or CASH meant cashier. If you look at the example that I put sort of to the right of the screen, that's the Paulison family. And you just look at the amount of abbreviations for Paulison Samuel M, the last line. You can see that he was a brakeman for NYC and STLRR, which is an abbreviation that luckily the city directory clarified as a railroad, the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad. And also that is followed by H, which means in this directory, it means house. So that was his house. But if you look, it's the same address as the few listings above him, and those have B's right before the address number, which means boards. So it's likely that Samuel was the one who owned the house. And so that's just how you can use these abbreviations to sort of get a lot more information about your ancestors and relatives. So we are going to talk about how to find and search the city directories using MyHeritage. Now, there are two ways to find city directories at MyHeritage, and they both begin under the research tab on the website. So that is the furthermost right-hand tab, research. So the first way is to do a general search, searching all the records, and the second way is to do a catalog search. So I'll show you how to do a general search first. So you'll hover over research and then you'll press search all records. And then here you'll come up to this page where you can input all of the information, name, date of birth, and place. And the place does not need to be where someone was born. It could be anywhere that they lived throughout their entire life. And then you will be greeted with a web page that has a huge list of relevant records. So this is just in all of the collections across MyHeritage. For city directories specifically, you'll want to narrow down by category on the left hand of the page to directories, guides, and references. And then underneath, you can choose directories. There might also be reference books that pop up, but for example, in this example, there weren't. So it's just all those city directories. So the second way to find the city directories on MyHeritage is to navigate to the collection category or collection catalog underneath research. And this catalog shows you all the over 7,000 collections that MyHeritage has. So of course, not all of those are going to be city directories. So we'll want to narrow those down. On the left-hand side, you can start narrowing it down in a very cool way. So you can choose the collection category, directories, guides, and references. And once you do that, you can sort it even more by collection category to directories, or you can refine it by location. So if you wanted it to just be directories and guides from the United States, you would be able to do that. So I did that here, and there's still 361 collections, and that's quite a lot for me. So I know I'm looking for things specifically in Fort Wayne in this example. So I can refine it further to Indiana, and then I have 122 collections for Indiana. But if you're looking for a specific city, you could possibly find something by searching for a collection or a keyword in that search bar on the right-hand side of the page. So I searched for Fort Wayne and I found 49 collections. So these include city directories from the 1900s. So those are the two ways to find the city directories on MyHeritage. Now we're going to talk about tracing a family with city directories that are on MyHeritage. And I do want to start by saying that the US City Directory collection at MyHeritage is extremely unique and groundbreaking for genealogy research. So MyHeritage uses advanced machine learning technology that it specifically developed for its US City Directory collection to read, organize, and sort over 1.3 million records. So all of these records have been consolidated to reduce duplication and to hundreds of millions. Oh, did I say millions? I meant 1.3 billion. Sorry, just that's quite a lot, right? So they've been reduced to hundreds of millions of records of aggregated data, each featuring the same individual at the same address over a span of years. So this makes it easier to find all of those applicable city record or city directory record listings at once. So instead of searching for 1908 and 1909 and 1910 and so on and so forth, MyHeritage has made it so much easier because it's just automatically taken that information from 1908, 1909, and all of those directories and fit them into the same category if the details match. Additionally, a fun little thing that I found is that their technology automatically takes the information out of the city directory record, including the abbreviations, and it displays it for you. So I'll show you that in a couple slides too. But for example, today, I'm going to use my second great-grandfather, Samuel Marion Paulison. And I recommend when you are starting to use city directories in your research, you would do a timeline. Now, this is all the information that I had based off of vital records and the census records for Samuel Marion Paulison. So going from his birth in 1865 to his death in 1917. And I underlined all of the residences and like places of events here just so you can see them. But if you'll take a closer look, I really don't have a lot of information just in general. I don't really know where he was living except on census years. And of course, I know where his sons and daughter were born, but somehow that doesn't match with the last residences that I know of. So it's very confusing. There's not a lot of information there, and I think city directories could help us with that. So let's take a look. So I did a search for him in the city directories collection, and it came up with thousands of results. I was able to narrow it down a little bit by defining the place as Indiana, instead of New Jersey, which has a lot of people with the same name, but I know that he probably didn't live there at one point. But I found lots of results. And what very much interested me at first was the fourth result down on the search page, which had him living at 1109 St. Mary's Avenue in Fort Wayne between the years 1908 and 1916, because that's almost a decade of time. So it could give us a lot of information. So I clicked on that, and this is where you can see just how powerful the technology MyHeritage has created for this is. So it gives you, obviously, the ability to save to a family tree on MyHeritage. But it also takes all of the dates from the individual records and combines it into the residence dates. It shows you the address and gives you the option to see who else lived at that address. It gives you the resident status. So if they were a homeowner, a boarder, or a renter, that sort of thing. And it does that by reading those abbreviations before the address. It also gives you their spouse and an implied marriage date, which in this case is inaccurate because Rachel, or she didn't appear as his spouse until about 1910 in the city directories, because they just didn't record the spouse's names until then in Fort Wayne. But it will also give you the occupation and employer and all of the records associated with this person at that address that created all of that data. And of course, there's the image viewer down below. So I wanted to see who else lived there, and I got 16 more results for people who lived there. So Rachel Paulison lived there in 1909, and then just a whole other list of results, including people who were residents after Samuel probably wasn't, in the 1920s to the 1950s. So I took that timeline, and with the help of MyHeritage's searching algorithms, I was able to expand a lot more on some of the gaps that I had in the research. So the birth, then I got sort of skipped until 1908, and that's where we find him living at 1109 St. Mary's Avenue in Fort Wayne, and that he owned the home, and he worked as a brakeman for the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, which was also called the Nickel Plate Railroad. Now, when I looked at a couple of the later 1910, 11 city directories, it was called the Nickel Plate Railroad in there, not the Chicago-St. Louis Railroad. I also found that Samuel's son, Orville, he worked as a seal clerk for the same railroad, and he lived there or right next door for a few years. Now I say or right next door because it says he lived at 911 St. Mary's Avenue, but that could have been a typing error, because in 1912 through 1914, Orville was living with Samuel and his family. I was also able to track Samuel's mother, Rachel, who was the widow of Jacob, his father. And it said that in 1910, she was a boarder living with him at the same address. So it just added all of that information for me, and I saved so much time having to not research or specifically search for each of those specific dates and each of those city directories. It was all just there for me. But this is not the only thing you can do. I did mention putting more context into your ancestors' lives with city directories. So I opened up the 1908 Fort Wayne directory, which you've seen lots of examples of. And I did a little bit of digging into just the places that I knew he might have been associated with. Now, I know for a fact that the Paulson family were members of the Wayne Street Church. And so I found that record in the 1908 directory. And just by looking at the Wayne Street Church's institution information, I was able to locate where it was and who their pastor was. And I know that my family back then, through oral family histories, were pretty involved in their church. So they likely talked a lot to the pastor. So I found his name, and I could do fan research and learn more about him, and then learn more about my ancestors in that way. But also through the Wayne Street Church's listing, I found sort of the beginning of a schedule for what my ancestors and relatives could have been doing each week, because it gives the specific times for Sunday services, which I'm sure that they likely went to weekly, or at least as much as they could. And it gives the times for Sunday school and the weekly prayer meeting. However, that's not the only thing. So Samuel and his son Orville were both employed in the railroad. And the Fort Wayne Directory has a very long list of unions and groups that they could have been a part of. So that includes the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen, Railway Trainmen, locomotive engineers, and steam engineers. Now, each of these give you where they met and usually what time, or at least what day they met at. So that also can add something to the weekly schedule of my ancestor. And of course, the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, in parentheses, Western Division, it has its own listing in the City Directory, and includes a whole bunch of information that definitely puts more context into my ancestor's occupation. It specifically gives the people who worked above my ancestors, so his bosses and their bosses, and also just a little bit more context to how many miles of rail he could have been working on, and what specific division he was employed by. Also, a lot of the results for Samuel were not at that specific residence. And so I was able to find on MyHeritage different places that he lived earlier on in his life. Luckily, I know from census records that he was likely involved in the railroad industry his entire life. And I do know that he was involved with the church his entire life. So I was able to find more records, and these three are all included in those. But important to note here is that there are going to be spelling errors in city directories. So if a surname doesn't match what you know, how it's spelled, don't immediately cross it off your list. Do some more digging into the address and the occupation that is given to someone. So, for example, this 1889 record for Samuel M. Allison, it looks like my ancestor. I think it's my ancestor, but I didn't really want to verify it until I looked up that residence, the 213 Fairfield Avenue. And I was able to verify that he did live at that residence for a few years in the 1880s. The same goes for Samuel Paulison, a brakeman at 79 West Dewald Street. He did live there for a few years. They just misspelled his name twice. And then the 1897 example that's on your screen now, I find very interesting because it shows a whole bunch of abbreviations. So RES stands for residence, S is for south, west, or W is for west, and COR is corner. So Samuel M. Paulison, a trucker for the Wabash Railroad, was a resident on the southwest corner of Pequot Avenue and Marshall. So you can see just how condensed that sentence is by using these abbreviations. I did a lot more research using city directories, just looking through the years, the results on where he was living, what he was doing, and my tiny little timeline expanded drastically into this very, very long and semi-thorough residential history of Samuel M. Paulison. It also includes a little bit of occupational history. He went from being a brakeman for the Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad in 1889 all the way to, where was it? The Wabash Railroad, and then the Toledo, St. Louis, and Western Railroad, also known as the Cloverleaf Railroad, which is how it was called in the city directory. Then the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad. Another thing that I found through these city directories is, excuse me, is that Samuel, he passed away in 1917, but he wasn't living at the 1109 St. Mary's Avenue house in 1917. He was living elsewhere. Instead, his daughter Opal and his son-in-law Floyd Ferguson lived at that address, and the city directory indicates that they were the homeowners at that time. So just looking at that year and that specific time, now I have a lead on another record that I could look at, which would be a deed of sale or a mortgage or a transfer of property from the Samuel to Floyd Ferguson and his daughter Opal. So now I'm just going to give you a few tips for your city directory research. The first is to keep in mind the information listed in every city directory was collected up to 1 year prior to the date listed on the cover. So if the date says 1917, the information could have been collected in March 1916. So you'll want to look at multiple city directories. However, you can also look in larger city directories and even smaller ones. Usually when they are published, they will give a list of additions and removals or changes to the directory. I like this quote from the 1908 Fort Wayne one. These additions and removals are important items, but will do you no good unless you make the changes here noted in the body of the book. So these were additions and removals that were made just before printing and publication of the city directory. It was out of date initially. They had to update it right before printing. You're also going to really want to search using surnames. So not only are city directories generally organized alphabetically by surname, but many given names could also be abbreviated in addition to different occupations and street directions and that sort of thing. So WM could be William, SM could be Samuel, etc. Usually you're going to want to be looking for surnames, and also keep in mind there might be spelling errors. No city directory is perfect, of course, as we can see by an addition and removal list. Also be aware that over time, addresses and street names do change. This is much more common than we think. At my day job in Hinsdale, Illinois, I know that they changed their street names and their address numbering system in 1932, and then some street names were changed in the 1950s. So all of the houses were renumbered in 1932. Now, this is common throughout the United States. Reconfiguration of address numbering was common as cities and villages grew. It made more sense to have a house on one street numbered 84 and then 86 than 84, 108, 216 being right next to each other. These changes usually happened again as the population grew, but also when new residences were being built in between existing lots. So just keep that in mind. An address that is listed in 1915, it could still exist when you put it into Google Maps, but it might not be the same address that exists now, today. Also, always try to understand and look for that abbreviation list and look for the table of contents. Utilize those abbreviations found in the front pages of the directory and don't ignore the table of contents because it will help you navigate it much easier and much faster. And also the abbreviations like H being homeowner and B being border, that gives you a whole new set of information that you might not have already known. I personally didn't know that Samuel Paulison owned a house in the 1890s, but he did. And I found that using the city directories, and now I can look at property records and verify it. So that is my presentation, and I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. City directories are they're creating all kinds of enthusiasm here in the chat room, and people have some really nice questions. Do you? I'm wondering, and this is a question that's been asked a few times. What years were city directories published? Like, how far back do they go in the U.S. and how far forward do they come?
So, as I said at the beginning, the earliest directories were late 1700s, but those weren't those sort of comprehensive registers. We start seeing those in the middle or early middle, like 1820, 1810s in the United States. As to actual dates, it really does depend on the location and the town or the city. So smaller villages and smaller towns wouldn't have the capacity or the budget to hire a telephone company or a telegraph company or print their own city directory. They might be lumped in with a larger city directory. So for example, I know that Chicago has city directories going pretty far back, and it's common to find very close suburbs and incorporations like tacked on to the end of Chicago in the early directories when it wasn't so big. But it really depends on the history of that actual town. As to how soon or how like far close to us they go, it also sort of depends. I mean, with the advent of the internet, we started seeing everything start dying out a little bit in that regards. I personally have seen a yellow book from 2 years ago, and it's so thin now. It does not have many individuals' names because people can opt out of being in a directory if they wanted to. I think starting in the 80s or the 70s. Now most city directories aren't really city specific. They're online public records like websites. So
Interesting.
if you're looking for something sort of like a directory for, I don't know, like the 90s through now, I would look for directories that are from churches or religious groups or, fraternal organizations from the town that you are looking for. Often, like every 25 years, a church could publish like a history of this church and all of its current members, and it will give the church members' names and a photo of their family. But yeah, that's sort of how it is now.
Yeah. Now, Melissa and others are asking about addresses that have maybe changed over time, but what are there tools that you can use to correlate the old addresses with their contemporary street names and numbers?
So yes and no. I do a lot of house history research for my day job.
Okay.
And I have found that if you have a house built before the original street number, you might be able to find it in a property record or like a deed. However, that it might not be. It might be the actual legal description of it's lot 1 and 2 in block ABC of townships, whatever, which you'll find on the deed. But also looking at that question from the perspective of a historical society director, your historical and genealogy society will probably know how to find it very quickly for you. What I've done to find old records is pull out Sanborn fire insurance maps from pre-address change and look at that and look at Google Maps and compare the address on Google Maps to the address on the fire insurance map or the plot map, the landowning map. That's one way to find those records or find the change in address. Another one is newspaper articles. Those might include one if there was a legal notice or that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Wondering, this is a question from Julia. How do we know what City Directories MyHeritage specifically has? Is there a way to find that out?
That is a question that I don't believe I would be able to answer quite as thoroughly as someone at MyHeritage.
Yeah.
I know that you can do the catalog narrowing down that I did in one of the examples, but the U.S. City Directory collection is bigger than that way to search for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you have...
How you did that, how you narrowed it down to just Indiana, that was... I learned something new myself today. I was really impressed with how you went from big to small. So you never know what you're going to learn when you show up to the MyHeritage webinar series. So thank you.
Of course.
Do you have to be a MyHeritage member to access the city directories at MyHeritage?
I can look at that right now.
And I'm gonna guess yes. That would be part of your data subscription.
I feel like it could be.
Yeah. So if you have either the data or the complete subscription, that's where I would lean towards that you need to have either one of those to access the collections.
Yeah, let's just take a look. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can. Fun to watch you do this live.
Okay, so you saw my family tree maker thing open.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so it looks like this is not free. This entire collection, when it's a free record set, you'll have this little green box that says free next to it. Yeah. And so this one, it does look like you have to have a membership.
Okay. Well, one of the many things that make it worth having a MyHeritage membership, in my opinion.
Exactly.
An interesting question, and I'm not well, let me just ask, and you say yes, I know, or no, I don't.
Okay.
Is it? And I've been playing around with this over here on my screen. Is it possible to look up someone by their address? Do you have experience with that? I've been playing around with it here, and it's really neat.
Yes, it is, and I can show you.
Oh, thank you.
I can show you, actually. Let me figure out how to pull that back up.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoop, nope, come back. See, you see this family tree maker. There we go. Okay. So, yes, it is possible.
Yeah,
I'll show you how I was able to do it. It's a little bit of a workaround because there's not a specific search bar for it. So search all records, and then let's see here. Let me open an address that I know he lived at for a while.
Okay.
Okay, so 1109 St. Mary's Avenue. Great. Okay, so we are going to add place, Indiana, and then keywords. We're going to put the address in the keywords.
Interesting.
Apply, and then press search. and then it's going to load, and it might load slowly because of the webinar going on. Okay, so there's these keywords, right? This is a general search, so we're going to want to narrow it down by the collection category. So directories and guides. Now it's going to load again.
Yeah, it's looking good. So far, so good.
And then directories. Okay, and US City Directories. We don't need inventors of patents right now.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so now you see that there's all of these, it's Indianapolis, etc. So what I'm going to do is put that in quotation marks and see if that helped. And doesn't look like publication place Fort Wayne.
Okay, it's narrowed it down to Fort Wayne.
Yeah, you've got to play around with the settings. So like if it's the date, we can probably say like, woo, what are you doing? 1915 he was there.
Okay.
And then
You know what could be interesting, Catherine?
yeah.
Is there's a residence button kind of in the top left.
Oh yeah, there.
If you type it in there, or
yeah, that's what I was misremembering. There we go. See?
Or
Okay.
I wonder though. Also, yeah, let's see what that does. Yeah, so these are now all Fort Wayne for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then
in the residence,
you're going to
modify the residence and add the address right before. Yeah, like that. Now let's see what happens.
Okay, yeah, well, the other way that I've done it is I've gone to the collection catalog, then to, of course, these directories, and narrowed it to the state.
Yeah.
And then typed in Fort Wayne. Okay. And then I've picked a directory, added the keyword, which is the details for this specific directory, and then press search. Now, of course, it's giving 1109 and everything as streets and streets and streets.
See, what's fun about what you're doing right here is this applies to how all of us learn how to actually use these tools. Just doing it and seeing what happens. So, we're getting close.
It'll give you, I mean, if you know the person's last name or the last person who lived there and you search it. So here, that's how I was able to find one of these. Is I put in the last name Paulison and then 1109. The OCR, the character recognition, said it's Alaries, but it's Mary's.
Yeah. So
that's why I wasn't coming up at the top.
Right.
But you can Paulison, and then there he is.
Yeah, 1109 St. Mary's. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Huh. Very good.
So hopefully that helped. Little problem solving, but
absolutely.
There you go.
There was another, very related to this, there was another person that asked, can you search by occupation? And I was playing around over here on my screen while you were talking, and I found that so let's say I'm looking for John Smith the plumber. And so I type in John Smith, but then in the keyword field, that's where I typed in the occupation, and that is, and it actually works. So look at what you've just done there. You've narrowed it down to find all the plumbers in this directory.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. I think that keyword field is really powerful there.
The keywords is definitely super powerful. I really love the keyword
Yeah.
search on MyHeritage.
Okay. Can you just open one of those up? I want to see uh,
Yeah, sure.
and then scroll down to just below the image. I'm wondering where. No, okay, so this one might not have it. You mentioned, and this is
Mm-hmm.
another really neat thing that I think only MyHeritage has. You mentioned that it consolidates these, so if it finds the same person in
Mm-hmm.
multiple directories, it will actually list them, uh, list each of the
Yeah.
years there. Do you have an idea of someone that fits that?
Yes, I can do that right
Oh,
now.
very good. Some of our audience refers to what we're doing right now as watch Catherine live or watch Jeff live and
Yeah,
unscripted and
live streaming my genealogy research, huh?
yeah, you're doing very good.
Yeah, so here's the same guy who I used as the example.
Okay.
So this is the image of what I showed. So this will have records from between 1908 and 1916.
Ah,
And
look
so
at
what you
that.
can see,
Nice.
these are all of the records that MyHeritage has just automatically pulled and matched together as
Beautiful.
the same person living at the same address. And you can click on each of them, and if you look closely at the bottom at the image viewer, like if I click 1915, it pulls up the 1915 directory.
Yeah.
If I click 1916, it pulls up the 1916 directory.
Very good.
So it automatically is just matched that all together, and it's so powerful, and honestly, it would save genealogists a lot of time.
So we could say here MyHeritage because that is one of the neat things. Now go up
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
there's one more really neat thing I've noticed. No, okay, right there. See
This
who
one,
else? Yeah,
the magic
tell us
button.
about that. I love that. See who else
Yes.
lived at this address. What does this tell us?
So this takes that address and it matches it across all of the Fort Wayne directories that MyHeritage has digitized in their collection. And then it will show you who lived at 1109 St. Mary's Avenue from the earliest to the latest that they have. And I believe the latest were the Menzie family. So, and she's living here for, let's see how long. Well,
It looked like from the 20s to the 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
1925 to 1950. See, like, let us watch the scroll happen. Look at all of those records. And you can even see in the little descriptions how their occupations changed from
Yeah.
the beginning. So first Archie was a white watchman for this company, night watchman, and then he became a rewinder at a manufacturing company, and then a surfacer, and then a helper and a packager at GE, shipping clerk, factory worker, tool maker, and it's all just automatically populated right there for you.
Okay. So you could,
Yeah, but it's pretty amazing.
Oh, sure is. And all those people listed there, they may be relatives, but
Oh yeah.
also
Well, so here's the big example that I found. Was it says Ferkel, but again, the OCR, the character recognition, got it a little bit wrong.
Okay.
So if you remember, Samuel Pollison's daughter was named Opal,
Okay.
and she married Floyd Ferguson. And so looking at this, see others who lived here,
Yeah.
is how I found that the year that Samuel died, Floyd and Opal were homeowners of 1109 St. Mary's Avenue.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't said, well, Floyd was Opal's husband, but Ferkel's not their name. It was actually Ferguson.
Yeah.
But
well, good.
yeah,
so like you
relatives,
mentioned
etc.
Yeah. At the very beginning, you talked about the technology behind this, and these few things that we've seen just here. I don't think that you'll find it anywhere else, and so
I don't believe so at all.
Yeah. So, like Joe says here, nicely done. Thank you. Well,
Oh,
also
well,
nicely
thank you.
done to you, Catherine. Thank you. You've got a nice speaking voice. I appreciated that about today's class. Let
Well,
me.
thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm going to switch over here and let's do a couple of door prizes. And I'll just remind you that the replay of this, we'll put it up in the webinar library just shortly after we conclude here. And,
Hmm.
and you can browse through all of the various classes here in the MyHeritage library up at familytreewebinars.com. And our next live webinar is maybe too hot off the presses. We don't yet have the title announced for it, but sign up for it anyways. It's available for registration. We'll see you Tuesday, August 8th. And let's do a couple of door prizes. Our first door prize will be a 1-year MyHeritage Complete plan. So this, of course, gives you access to everything that we've gone over here today. I'm getting out my door prize picker tool. And our first winner, it looks like it goes to Darlene Boggs. Congratulations to you. Got to spell your name right. Darlene Boggs. All right. And just watch for an email from me. And then we'll do a MyHeritage DNA test kit. And we'll say congratulations to Fred Klein. Fred, glad to have you here today. And by the way, if you're new here at the MyHeritage webinar series, and if you want to know a little bit more about the benefits of having a webinar membership, stay with us just for a couple of minutes after we conclude here, and I'll show you some of those perks. And let's go back and see if we have other questions that we haven't yet covered. You've done really well with this today, Catherine. You answered that. Was it common for people to, this is from Katie, have you ever noticed this? Can people evade appearing in the city directories? Is it optional? Is it, how complete would you say that a directory is for the residents of the town?
I would say that early city directories up until the right before 1950 are rather complete. If unless someone was moving around quite a lot, they had an occupation that took them everywhere. I think it's pretty complete. It's when you get into after World War II where some people started saying, I don't want to be listed, I want to be private, don't give people my address. That really became a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about wildcard searching? Have you used that in the MyHeritage searching, and do wildcards work?
I personally have not,
haven't, okay.
because I'm lucky enough to know just generally where people were at a given time.
Yeah.
I mean, I inherited a 2-generation, multiple boxes of research and a GEDCOM file that my mom and grandma both worked on.
Oh,
so
fun.
I have a ton of research already done. So I'm lucky enough to be able to not have done that,
Yeah.
I guess.
I suppose.
But I'm sure looking at the website and seeing the actual technology behind just this specific collection, I would assume that using wildcards would work in MyHeritage.
Yeah, so Jane, who asked the question, just give it a try and see what happens. I mean, put a question mark in or an asterisk, and really just play with it. And it was fun to watch Catherine just kind of play around with those different fields as we tried to find by address. That's really how we learn how to use these various technologies. Well, Catherine, what I'm seeing here in the chat are just various suggestions about different chat topics here, and kind comments as well. So it looks like we've well, There's a couple of questions about will you find these in Canada or other places? I suppose as today's topic was the U.S., that would be a bit
Hmm.
beyond that scope. But have you ever seen city directories in countries other than the U.S.?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I do a lot of German research, and I know for a fact there are city directories from Germany.
Hmm.
There are city directories in Canada, the UK. Yeah, they existed all over the world.
Okay. Well, good to know. Before we say goodbye, and I show this quick 2-minute video to some of you here, Catherine, any final thoughts before we do that?
Make sure you look at the abbreviation list when you're using city directories, and don't assume surnames are spelled one way. They could be misprinted. And also, just thank you for coming. I
Yeah.
appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and continued best wishes in your research. Same to all of you, wherever and whenever you are around the world. Thanks for sharing part of your day with us. And remember, life is short. Do genealogy first. Bye, Catherine. Thanks.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Hmm. Okay, I'm going to hit the play button here. And again, this is if you're curious about what a webinar membership has, then stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Please join me for a brief tour of what our webinar membership offers. With a webinar membership, you'll gain unlimited and anytime access to over 2,000 genealogy webinars suited for every genealogist, from beginners to seasoned experts. You'll have access to our beginners section, designed specifically for those new to genealogy. If you're new to genetic genealogy, you'll enjoy the 5-course series by Blaine Bettinger. Discover the rapidly expanding DNA testing library, or explore the vast resources at Google. Our historical records collection has webinars about census, immigration, land, maps, military, and even tax records. The methodology library is full of case studies and techniques that you can apply to your own brick wall cases. And if you need help to get your paper files, your digital files, or even your DNA organized, you'll enjoy the organization webinars. Browse or search for your place, and you'll probably find something helpful like Canada, or Germany, Ireland, or Sweden. If you have ancestors in the U.S., we've got you covered. You can also learn about software, technology, or even writing and publishing. But that's not all. As a webinar member, you'll also unlock access to more than 7,000 pages of syllabus materials, providing you with additional resources to enrich your genealogical journey. You'll also have access to the chat logs from the live webinars. And a member favorite, you can jump right to the topic of interest in a webinar, which means you can skip the intros and get right to the content. Maybe a certain webinar sparks your curiosity, but you're pressed for time. As a webinar member, you can bookmark any webinar and revisit it later. Plus, you can view your watch history and even your registered live webinars. One of the most cherished benefits of a webinar membership is gaining access to the exclusive members-only series, Best of Elizabeth Shown Mills Genealogy Problem Solving. Learning from genealogy's pioneer in problem-solving methodology is a unique privilege that our members truly treasure. I hope you'll become part of the Legacy Webinar family. Click the Join Now link at familytreewebinars.com, and remember, life is short. Do genealogy first.